whether chemical weapons are used or not. Thousands of people will continue to die in the most horrific manner. It is the same horrific and senseless death, and our duty is not to choose what form of death is acceptable and what is not. Our duty is to stop the senseless and barbaric killings in Syria. We as the UN must end this war immediately, otherwise the people of Syria would continue to perish at the hands of these satanic and sadistic forces. The UN Security Council and all the powers behind the war in Syria must not only prevent the use of chemical weapons, but must also bring this brutal war to an immediate end without preconditions. The Syria war must be stopped, and stopped now. Mr. President, the 2013 MDGs report on Africa's performance reveals mixed results. Africa's substantial progress towards many goals, targets and indicators is beyond doubt, but serious challenges still remain, especially in translating economic growth into decent job opportunities, improving service delivery, and minimizing income, gender, and spatial inequalities. Violent conflicts and economic shocks in some countries, as well as unprecedented natural disasters over the decade, induced by climate change, have caused setbacks to the achievements of the MDGs in many countries. Despite these challenges, some African countries, and the Gambia in particular, are making impressive gains on some of the set goals. My government is on track to achieve the education MDG target for net enrollment in primary education and literacy rate among the population aged between 15 and 24 years. My government has made serious and informed policy reviews to prioritize basic primary education while expanding access to secondary, higher and tertiary education, with emphasis on improving quality in all areas. We are working diligently to ensure that the gap in gender enrollment disparity is closed by 2014 and to provide free education and an equitable chance for all to be literate by 2015 and above. Mr. President, we must ensure that the post-2015 development agenda builds on the important progress of the MDGs and is expanded to cover broader sustainable development issues as agreed in Rio. Therefore, your choice of the theme for this session, quote, the post-2015 development agenda, setting the stage, unquote, is indeed apt, timely, and thought-provoking. Clear, time-bound, targeted, and measurable global benchmarks are crucial if we are to realize our desired objectives. Mr. President, protecting African livelihoods requires international, regional, and country approaches that recognize and act on the overlap of conflicts orchestrated by foreign powers and severe weather hazards. The Gambia family believes that mitigating the adverse effects of climate change and putting an immediate end to the massive looting of African natural resources by Western multinational companies calls for timely and decisive global response. It is a challenge that should unite us, not divide us. The Gambia is of the firm opinion that Africa should play an active role in shaping the goals based on its own development priorities and common interests. Mr. President, the biggest threat to human existence are basically three and are a consequence of human behavior which are ungodly attributes. These are: one, excessive greed and therefore addiction to gather material wealth by any means necessary, mostly through violent or immoral schemes. 2, obsession with world domination by any means, including the resolve to use nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons to achieve this fanciful dream. The third, Mr. President, is homosexuality in all its forms and manifestations, which, though very evil, anti-human as well as anti-Allah, is being promoted as a human right by some powers. All these three have nothing to do with climate change and are more deadly than all natural disasters put together. Mr. President, the first one led to not only colonization and the plundering of African and Asian human and material resources, but also led to two devastating wars among the Western powers that be, and unfortunately were wrongly termed World War I and II. Colonialism was maintained by subjugation and massive looting of resources in the colonies, leading to the impoverishment and destitution of hundreds of millions of colonial subjects. From the 13th century up to the middle part of the 20th century, the notion of human rights, good governance, and democracy were philosophies that were forbidden to Africans. Any African under the colonial government who advocated for this ended up either at the gallows, in a mass grave, or rotted in a colonialist-built dungeon called prison. This was during the colonial era, when the African continent was treated like an abandoned game park, and Africans were treated worse than animals. Today, after fighting for our freedom and liberating our continent, we are being prescribed a new religion: democracy, human rights, and good governance by descendants of the same colonial powers. Present-day Africans cannot be hoodwinked by anyone anymore, and we are determined to defend our independence and dignity and take control of our natural resources at any cost and by any means necessary. Mr. President, coming to the second threat, obsession with world domination.